Hi everyone, my name is Nick Diana, and I'm going to be talking today about Persuasion Invasion, an educational game built to address some of the unique challenges of the civil discourse space. I'm at Colgate University where I run the Dart Lab, and we're primarily interested in this question: how can we use technology to make civil discourse more productive? So importantly, when we talk about civil discourse, we're not talking about politeness, but rather discourse that fosters democratic goals. And in the United States, at least, this problem seems to be getting worse, with more people reporting that discussing politics is stressful and frustrating rather than interesting and informative. And there's lots of reasons why this might be the case, but the real first line of defense in this fight is the public education system. And civics has some unique structural challenges that make it difficult to design educational technology in this space. First, many civic skills are social, which is something that's hard to scale. Civil discourse is also an ill-defined domain, unlike algebra or chemistry, with well-defined, verifiable solutions. And there are some broader domain challenges, like the fact that because democracy is massively cooperative, the impact of each individual is relatively small. The heterogeneity of the electorate often means that progress is slow and incremental. And the project is also inherently collectivist. And so I think it's worth pausing to consider these unique challenges, especially through the lens of game design, because lots of these features run counter to the most common features of games. But I actually think that context-rich games are the only educational technology that can be really effective in this space. So let's talk about the game that we designed, Persuasion Invasion. The premise of the game is that aliens are invading the planet, but these aliens are pacifists, so they don't conquer planets through warfare, but instead sow discord into communities and make the people unable to work together to solve basic problems. So each level focuses around a different scenario, and scenarios are designed to be both evocative and relevant to students. To win each level, players must persuade each townsperson to move into the town square, that green area, which symbolizes their willingness to work together to solve the problem at hand. Spatially, this is also a nice visual metaphor for coming together. To persuade people, players first have to play detective, gathering clues about the townspeople so that they can identify what they value. Each townsperson cares about one of 5 different values, which are based off of Haidt's moral foundations theory. So the first step is identifying which one of these 5 foundations each townsperson values. And after a player's identified what a townsperson values, they still might have to reduce that townsperson's tribalism. Tribalism here is essentially a measure of how open a townsperson is to being persuaded. And so if a townsperson's tribalism is high, there's a good chance that your persuade action is going to fail. So players can reduce tribalism by playing one of these green cards, like Conversation Reset or Confirm Understanding. So once you've identified the values and reduced the townsperson's tribalism, then you can attempt to persuade them. So this action asks you to choose the statement that will be most persuasive to this specific townsperson, in this case Claire. And so these statements are some of the beliefs from the other opposing side of the issue, and your job is to pick the one that is going to be most persuasive to Claire, that appeals to their values. If we choose the right option, then Claire moves into the town square. So players have a certain amount of energy each day, and when they run out of energy, they can end the day to replenish it, but after night falls, the aliens get their chance to sow more discord into the community. So there are 3 main learning objectives that we had when designing this game. How good are students at identifying values, reducing tribalism, and choosing appropriate civil discourse moves. And we actually had a 4th one that had to do with reducing bias with the use of a value adaptive intervention. If you're interested in that, you can find more information in this paper. So we tested this game in 2 local schools with 6 classrooms. One of these is double counted here. We did get player experience, some qualitative and quantitative experience data. I don't have time to get into it here, but it was mostly positive. Okay, so let's talk about these learning objectives. So for value identification, we tested the impact of practice on performance, right? Did learning happen using this mixed effects model? So here the outcome is either 0 for incorrect or 1 for correct. Prior opportunities represents the number of times the student has attempted a value identification task prior to this attempt. And then we include a nested random effect with the student's unique identifier nested under their AP status, which tended to be predictive in some models. And we also included another random effect that represents the value students are being asked to identify. And so we found that prior opportunities was a significant predictor of outcome, suggesting that students' ability to identify values latent in text improved with practice inside the game. The second key skill we looked at was the student's ability to effectively reduce tribalism. So to measure student performance on tribalism reduction over time, we calculated this ratio at each attempt. So this is a comparison between the character's current tribalism value to their default value. How much basically has been reduced before attempting to persuade them. So here's what we found. This top graph shows the tribalism ratio on the y-axis and prior opportunities on the x-axis. And the bottom graph simply shows the number of users in the system at each opportunity. And so this is important to include because this lets us know that all of this erratic behavior at the tail end of the top graph is due to just a small number of students being left in the system. But what we also see is that while a majority of users are in the system, mean tribalism ratio decreases steadily with practice. And this suggests that students understand that, at least in the context of this game, how tribalism can be a barrier to discourse and some strategies that they can use to reduce it. The last key skill we focused on is students' ability to choose the most appropriate discourse move for a given scenario. So here is a scenario, here's a screenshot of the assessment task for this skill, which is essentially just a multiple choice question. And here's what we found. So again, student performance on this task increased steadily over time. Students were better able to identify the most appropriate discourse move with practice. So the takeaway here is that the skills that underpin productive civil discourse can be practiced in context-rich educational games.